Well, hi everybody. It's 4 o'clock, so why don't we get started? Welcome to the Learning 2.0 conference. I hope your keynote session went well. I had to duck out a little bit to get started, but Chad and everybody on the panel was fantastic. I'm looking forward to going back and seeing the recording. Just to make sure that you're in the right place, the title of this session is Beyond Super Searchers, Adapting Information Literacy to Meet the Generative AI Challenge. We'll do a more formal introduction in just a moment, but let's take care of some business first. First note, your audio and video are off for this session. If you'd like to offer questions or converse with your fellow attendees, please use the chat function located in the Zoom menu. If you'd like to tweet, skeet, or make some other type of post to social media, please use the hashtags Library2025 and or AI in libraries. Um, so just as a reminder, the session is being recorded. You may have heard that, and you've got the little disclaimer at the top of your screen. You'll be able to view any of these presentations after the conference on the Library 2.0 YouTube channel. I know you had a lot of options as far as sessions were concerned during this time slot, so know that you can always catch the recording, and that'll mitigate some of that dreaded fear of missing out. Um, by my count, let's talk about our sponsors. This is the 29th Library 2.0 online event. Suffice it to say, there's no way this series would be here or as useful to the library community as it has been without the founding leadership of the San Jose State University School of Information. Um, Today's event was also made possible by futureofai.org, which is a new networking and community space addressing AI issues in education and libraries. So let's get on with the show. Welcome to Beyond Super Searchers, adapting information literacy tools to meet the generative AI challenge. Today, we're going to talk about the Public Library Association's recent rollout of Super Searchers, which is a Google-sponsored initiative focusing on misinformation and critical thinking skills. The new iteration, which is set to start in May, the new iteration of Super Searchers really focuses on building fluencies around generative AI content. Um, and we'll have some information about when that starts shortly. My name is Toby Greenwalt. I run a tiny consulting firm called Flywheel Strategies, where we're devoted to catalyzing impact for community-focused organizations. That includes libraries. It also extends to schools, community groups, CDCs, and beyond. You can see more at my website, flywheelstrategies.io. I've been the implementation lead for PLA on both of these initiatives, and so I'm going to share a bit about both the program that we set out in 2023, as well as kind of give a sneak preview of what we're going to do now in 2025. We're going to talk a bit about the challenges that come with engaging patrons in a public library space, the skills and theory that underpin the Super Searcher's approach to information literacy. We'll talk a little bit about some of the tools that are integrated into the web browsing experience that can be crosswalked to other spaces beyond Google. Um, and then we'll also reflect a little bit on how trends in generative AI have led to this further iteration on the program. Um, because this is a PLA initiative, I'm mostly going to be providing a public library perspective. We're thinking about how, interactions often occur at a reference or information desk, and the the expectations patrons often bring to the table are shaped by the way that they interact with information online. Most of the time, people come to us looking for quick answers, and that can put some pressure on us to illustrate, the nuance or the context behind an answer, while they're still looking for something that might be, you know, Google-esque for lack of a better term. Just want to put that before we jump into it, just recognize that that type of transaction has a few constraints and opportunities, and we'll present the rest of the information from that perspective. We'll give you the nickel tour of Super Searchers. We'll provide some grounding for how to fit some of these information literacy principles into your day-to-day library service. And then we'll talk about the updates and how we've responded to trends in generative AI. Just as a spoiler, I think the principles behind this have stayed pretty solid, stayed pretty evergreen. I think there's been, you know, any efforts to challenge it, the type of critical thinking we're talking about here have have held up. But the approach, the way you might engage your patrons about the way generative AI tools have shifted the landscape are worth exploring here. So first off, let's give you a brief summary of the original Super Searchers program. PLA and Google first launched Super Searchers in 2030 or in 2023. And this program was built off an initial pilot that was run by members of the European Public Library Council as part of their Public Libraries 2030 initiative. PLA and myself, we ran a series of webinars in the fall of that year, and we create a set of training resources and shareables that are all hosted on the PLA website. And I'll include the link here in this presentation. Those 5 webinars drew in nearly 1,500 attendees from across North America and scattered other countries. And just as additional preamble, while Super Searchers focuses on search, it's really designed to provide a lens into how to build up your critical thinking muscles. All these are things that can be applied to many types of information seeking. Let's talk a little bit about the theory behind it. The principles underpinning a lot of the Super Searchers content is known as SIFT. And this was a method that's been developed by information researcher Mike Caulfield, and that's been developed through his work with journalists and professional fact checkers. And SIFT, of course, we're librarians, we love our initialisms. It takes the shape of four steps. The first one is stop. It's really easy to just want to kind of absorb information that comes in as we're doom scrolling or what have you. And in that rapid fire, barrage of information, we tend to just note it and move on. By introducing that stop element when we come up with things that require a little more investigation, that just helps us kind of pump the brakes on our overall cognitive acceptance of something. Second is the I for investigate the source. So get to understand not just what's being published here, but who they are and what their motivations might be. So getting proper context behind the publisher or the creator of said content. F for find better coverage. So of course, you always want to try to find comparative or dissenting opinions on this. So using the tools at your disposal to provide some contrast to what you found. And then T, tracing the original context. And that allows you to sort of dig a little deeper to find the details about what you've encountered. This might be a primary source, if it's a snippet from a video, maybe looking for the entire thing. If it's a quote, maybe it's looking at the full background behind what person's been saying, so that if the article is trying to present something as a gotcha, you can dig a little deeper and find some more information about it. The thing to remember though with SIFT is that it's not designed to be linear like this. You don't have to go in the SIFT order, and you can make it as simple or as thorough as you want it to be. Maybe you've encountered something that just it has this, you're not sure about the source. It's some new publisher that you're not familiar with, so that's you might just do the I there. In other cases, you might only need one of the other steps about tracing the context for the quote. In some cases you might have to go do the full set of investigations. And my first thought when I saw this was that this seems almost too simple. Both my own thoughts and a common response I received during the first training was that this method is something that library workers and people who work with information already do. But then I realized, after I was talking to more of the attendees of these sessions, is that our patrons don't necessarily know that. And once I started presenting this material, um, with that context through that lens, it was like you could see the light bulb going off in our audience. You know, what felt like second nature to us in a lot of cases is not something that came naturally to them. So this just gives us kind of a framing device through which to make our processes known. You know, we get to pull back the curtain a little bit. And luckily, you know, so far, knock on wood, it seems to have held up, whether you're dealing with regular search content or material that happens to be created through generative AI. Just provide you a couple of examples of things that we used during the original training. Um, we framed these as little quizzes during the session. The first one is this cheeseburger Oreo. Of course, Oreo is always putting out new crazy flavors, and we asked people, you know, is this something that actually seems like it would exist? You know, lots of you know restaurants and places put out wacky collaborations for views or what have you. So while it seems plausible, is it actually a real thing? And yes, I agree. That sounds horrifying, and that deserves all of the sickly emoji that goes with it. Um, but you know, I'm sorry to disappoint. This is fake. This was something somebody made on the internet for the lulz. And as we walked through the super searcher protocol, we were able to illustrate through some searches and through the right type of context clues that this was something someone just made for kicks. The second example here came from this social media post, RIP Twitter, stating that European water levels are so low that sunken German warships are popping up in the Danube. And this was another case where, you know, even though it seems hard to believe, it actually is true. And there were some, you know, you were able to find primary news sources and primary photographs that showed that this is something actually happening, along with some deeper context about the way climate change is affecting water levels uh, in Europe and around the globe. These are pretty simple, and you know they're really designed to provide kind of just a real quick jumping on point for people to start to think about how you might be able to think about the stuff as you interact with it in the wild. You know, more than anything, it's designed to induce that sort of that the stop part of sift. Um, you know, just take that pause before you keep scrolling. But you know, it's also meant to sort of introduce, you know, what happens when your results might be a little more complicated. Um, you know, Sift here helped us to illustrate the nuance within a given answer. Um, in this case, we have a still from a YouTube video showing a piece of Fiestaware bowls that you know, made by this company in Homer, West Virginia, just about an hour south of where I am right now. And there was a set, particularly the red models that were made pre World War II. The paint was used depleted uranium, and you can see here in this test, they put a Geiger counter up next to it and it starts lighting up pretty heavily. And it raises that question, is this true? And is this safe? You know, there's a lot of Fiestaware in antique stores and in people's collections out there. So, you know, are we sure we're not just introducing radioactivity into our homes? Um, and you know, by going a little deeper into this, we're able to trace some sources and get some more context. In this case, this shows us some information that while there is a higher concentration of uranium oxide in this dishware, the plates are considered safe for use unless they're chipped or cracked, or potentially unless you eat the plates. So, you know, in this case, we see, you know, the answer is not so cut and dried. While, yes, there is uranium in them, um, the question of whether or not they're safe is sort of yes-ish. Um, and it doesn't have to be as alarmist as you might initially respond upon first glance. Um, and so having having that ability to take a pause, investigate the source, trace the claim, um, just illustrates that sometimes despite wanting an answer to be totally certain, um, there's going to be some uncertainty in it, and you got to be comfortable with that. And when we were speaking with training attendees, almost all public librarians, many of them expressed, you know, this happening on numerous occasions, kind of when they're in the moment, and needing to be able to provide that context around an answer, even if the patron wanted something, just the quick, easy answer right away. And SIFT provided this lens to work in the moment. While you can hold formal classes on this, and one of the resources that PLA provided was a version of the presentation that could be adapted to a more formal training session. um, that still raises some questions as to what kind of audience you're going to get with that. People who are going to be interested in that kind of information literacy may already possess some of those skills, so it's likely they're going to be kind of a self-selected audience. Um, being able to having kind of a shorthand way to model this behavior while you're helping a patron look for information means it's much easier to play up the value of critical thinking without making judgments on their query. It's that's the old reference saw about, I don't necessarily know the answer, but I know how to find it. I don't know if this is true, but I know some techniques to investigate you know, how this was put together and what the context is behind it. Well, this isn't a perfect solution to confirmation bias. It can give you that little, crack in the door, the toehold to start a more nuanced conversation. It's with that in mind, I want to kind of eat my own dog food here and apply the same level of scrutiny to the source material. This is as good an excuse as any to address one question you might be thinking: why Google? I think it's pretty safe to make the statement that the Google search interface has changed considerably over time. There's a fair amount of reporting out there revealing that some of the firewalls between Google's search mission and its commercial goals have dissolved over time. And this has only been sort of compounded by the integration of AI generated search summaries. For example, this photo here, did you know that newborn elephants can fit in the palm of your hand? Um, this despite the fact they're stated to be over 200 pounds. So that's got to be a dense little critter there. I'm sure you've seen more than a few examples of other AI mishaps. There was that one about suggesting to use non-toxic glue when you're making pizza sauce. Um, yeah, hippos being able to do surgery. There's a whole cottage industry of people highlighting these things. Um, and a lot of this comes from the mechanics of how the 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 AI tool pulls the information. It's making educated, it's making educated hypotheses based on a large aggregate of resources. In this case, in the case of the elephant, it's pulling an image from, I believe it was from like a Shutterstock AI generated tool that was labeled as a baby elephant. In other cases, it might be presenting, something satirical or, something, a joke from social media as the real thing. So there's a lot of signal, or there's a lot of noise that the model might be pulling from. Um, and it kind of demonstrates how much of an uphill climb separating the signal can be. But these perceived weaknesses also present us with something of an opportunity. Um, while Google's usage has slipped a smidgen over time, it's still by far the top search interface and still the name, the verb people use when they're thinking about how they search for information on the web. For the vast majority of our users, Google is still that primary starting point. So, and it's only gotten more diverse, the ways in which they do it, whether they're using web searches, whether you're using maps, whether they're taking photos and using kind of the Google Lens tool to search for something. Um, there's a lot of ways that Google has commanded that search market. So it's really in our best interest to work with what we have here and to make use of the tools that are built into the interface to help illustrate the process behind this type of critical thinking. Because even as there's more noise being placed on the Google search page, advertising content, social media posts, AI tools, AI summaries, and so on. The signal is out there if you know where to look for it. A good example of this is the about this resource option that's embedded into every search result. If you click on the three dots next to every link, brings up some added context about the sourcing. And it includes some information on the host site itself. Here we learn about this is coming from the Oak Ridge Associated Universities. It provides some background research on what they do and why why the search engine has selected the resource it has. And then provides additional links if you scroll down about that site itself and relevant links that tie into the source that you're looking for. Each piece creates kind of a new opportunity to go a little deeper. Um, and this is just a way to sort of illustrate that, whether it's through the standard search engine or through something like the AI generated summaries, we can kind of crosswalk those competencies around the information we find into the other tools. Yeah, and we can see some of these same features embedded into other types of search results. About this image is a function that's similar to the about this resource on the previous page. Clicking on that gives you, tells you how old the image is. A lot of times you'll see, like particularly, we've seen examples when there's natural disasters. They'll show a photo of, there's one example of like a shark swimming through a drainage ditch. And this gets passed off as some new thing every time a place floods or if there's a hurricane that hits an area. And it'll give you that context about, not just the age of the thing, but some other background about what these things are. And all of this sort of helps to illustrate kind of the secret sauce here, especially if you're in that public library environment responding to questions in real time. If you're able to use these tools to pull back the curtain on how the search results get presented, you're able to say, this result is here, but here's some context about it. Or the AI summary pulled this from the following sources. It can help to serve to demystify the magic behind those search results. Instead of saying, oh, this is coming up, just automatically, this is coming up because of X, Y, and Z. So I mean, it'll take a little practice to kind of work that into your general rapport with patrons. But if you use it alongside that regular information seeking behavior, it becomes kind of a reflexive action. And as always, when you're working with the public in an environment that expects quick responses, you need to take what small wins you can get. And that brings us to that question of how we adjust to incorporate search results brought on by generative AI. If it's our job to help people separate signal from noise, generative AI results run the risk of becoming a really noisy fire hose. The key thing is not to panic. Remember the S part of SIFT and use those fundamentals to help folks identify the mechanics of how a particular AI created result comes about. We can go back to the baby elephant, which fortunately Google has corrected since that earlier mishap. If you have an AI generated result, you can use the sourcing and tracing to help folks think about how this result might have been put together. If you can help them kind of grasp that this result is synthesized from a much larger body of existing data, you can maybe help them get the gears to turn a little bit and help them look for, what the primary source might be and be able to, verify this result that has come in. Once again, there's a learn more option within the window that works the same way those three dots work. This will tell you about the source. It says here this was generated with the help of AI, gives you some more context around the result. And then within the search results, there's links for each, and that gives you, a mini bibliography of sorts that illustrates where the sourcing comes from. That same context also exists across other media. If you use a reverse image search or the about this image option, it'll help you provide some of these initial clues. Y'all remember this photo of the Pope wearing a pretty baller puffer jacket. Um, but using that about this resource makes it clear right away that this was AI generated. Um, a lot of the material that we're showing here assumes some measure of direct interaction, but you don't necessarily have to wait for them to come to you. Another element that people really responded to during the initial run of Super Searchers training was having these prompts that you can use to entice people to engage with you. We had a lot of good luck with shareables, either physical flyers like you see on the left or stuff sized for social media, like this is the sample Instagram post here. Um, and, this idea that you just sort of bait the hook a little bit for people to come in and really approach you about um, the possibility for critical thinking about these resources. It's just little tricks that you do to kind of draw people in. So as a quick recap, the things you want to keep in mind, whether you're dealing with AI or whether you're dealing with traditional search results, there's some things you want to keep in mind. The first is to seize the moment. The library environment's often really busy and people may not be able to take part in formal instruction. As you do with bibliographic instruction, use the questions to come to you to introduce some of these critical thinking techniques in the moment. Second is to articulate your thoughts. What comes natural to you doesn't necessarily come natural to your users. And so if you describe your thought process as you go, especially if you use something like SIFT, you can help sort of, just demystify some of these results a bit. Third is to use context tools. We love a bibliography, and the about this function can be a good jumping off point for a similar pathway. Help people explore the nuance within a question that might be more complicated, and use as a tool to start conducting deeper research. Fourth part is to filter heavily. This is a fire hose we're dealing with. And so, that because that can be really overwhelming, if you can show people how to triage unnecessary information, like for example, how to ignore the ads you see that come through, just knowing that this part of the search page is sponsored content, that can help reduce the overall amount of stimuli that are coming in. And then finally, of course, patience and repetition are key. Whether you're dealing with an inexperienced patron or someone dealing with some very heavy cognitive bias, it's going to take some time for them to absorb some of these techniques. And so, I mean, it's important to use your established rapport with your patrons to keep coming back to these concepts, and hopefully, over time they'll start to come around to this. We're just about out of time, so I want to leave you with two things. The first is an article that can serve as a jumping off point for further investigation. I love a reference. Um, uh, Along with some techniques for better separating signal and noise. It's called Critical Ignoring as a Core Competence for Digital Citizens. And a lot of it is informed by Caulfield's research, but it also helps to spell out some additional techniques that you can integrate beyond SIFT as well. The link is down here. You can, if you check the recording, you'll be able to follow up later on. The second is the schedule for the upcoming Super Searchers trainings. We'll offer a more extensive overview into SIFT, and we'll showcase some of these additional resources for engaging with children, with engaging with children in particular about managing their online experience. We're going to have a little bit of both in here. ALA is going to be opening up registration shortly, so keep an eye out. These are free webinars. All you need to do is sign up online. And with that, we're out of time, so I want to thank you for coming to today's program. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or my email address is also listed here if you'd like to consider continue the conversation outside of the conference. But thank you all for being here. I'll post the link also for the critical ignoring article. It is open access, so you can view the whole text there. Um, any thoughts on how to make this learning last and be sustainable over time? I would say, I mean, repetition is the key thing. I like having little reminders. I love a good trivia quiz. So if you're able to put those, if you put a little prompt out there about a um, potential piece of misinformation, you can, use that to start a conversation. And hopefully over time, people will come to you for, that becomes a regular element for them to engage with you at the library. I think it's just a matter of, be consistent and be persistent. That would be my recommendation.